Joining me now is Lara Bazelon. She's a law professor at the University of San Francisco and had long believed that the pair were overcharged. Professor, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it. All right, tell me, what am I getting wrong here?
Well, your summary is correct, so I can't poke any holes in that. But I think it's really important to underscore a couple of things. First of all, this was an empty police car. No one was injured. No one was hurt. And second of all, the kind of terrorism enhancement that you mentioned in your intro has historically been reserved for extremely serious crimes. It was passed in 1995 to deal with international terrorism. It then was expanded after the Oklahoma City bombing, which murdered, I think, over 150 people, including 10 children. And then, of course, it was used in 9/11. This is nowhere near that order of magnitude. Had it been imposed, they would have been looking at 10 years. Now, you are correct. The request is for 18 to 24 months. The judge could go as high as 5 years. I also think another thing that's really important to remember is that we want to be equitable. In other words, you want people who commit crimes, as you say, against law enforcement officers to be held to account in a similar way. And my question back to you is, what about all of the January 6th attacks, which resulted in actual death of law enforcement officers? And what about all of those people, who many of whom are being charged with misdemeanors in federal court?
Yeah, and someone was in my ear. I'm sorry. Were you asking me about the January 6th attacks?
Yeah, I want to know what you think about
So let me tell you something. I have advocated vociferously for anyone who attacked law enforcement on January 6th to have the book thrown at them. So you're not going to have me defending any of the people who are getting sort of lighter sentences with regard to attacking police officers. I did advocate, when it came to January 6th, for people who just literally walked in and 30 seconds later walked out. I thought that those people should see a lot of mercy in connection with the prosecutions, but I view those things as apples and oranges. So I am very consistent in my position in believing that people who attack law enforcement should have the book thrown at them. But I do think there is something, and I'm not going to call it unique, but what really bothers me here is you talk about terrorism. This was an effort to instill fear in police. Yes, it was an empty police car, but the reason that they were throwing a Molotov cocktail at a police car was to scare police officers. And to me, that is a very, very dangerous act that deserves very, very serious punishment. And one of the reasons that, I appreciated you coming on the show is because from the beginning, you've been consistent in your position that you've believed that they were overcharged. And that just surprises me, considering how significant it is to me when someone tries to scare police officers in that way.
So I hear what you're saying. What I'm saying is two things. One, I understand that you, Dan, would want this punishment to apply across the board, but as you just acknowledged, it's not. In fact, it's not being applied against any of the people who did very serious, even murderous harm on 1/6.
Wait. We don't know yet. There are a lot of people who are yet to be tried, right, in connection with what happened on January 6th. And the people who engaged in the most egregious violence against police have been charged with the most significant crimes, and the vast majority of them have not pled because of that, because they're facing serious cases with potentially serious time behind bars.
Fair enough. We don't know all of the charges, but as of yet, and we are now more than a year into this incident, no one has been. But I think the other thing is, you said they did this to incite fear in the hearts of the police. But the truth of the matter is, you and I aren't inside the minds of these two individuals. And if you think about sort of their lives before and their lives after, this was really an aberrant act. I am not excusing it. It's completely unacceptable, and I've been consistent about that too. But I think you have to ask yourself, is 45 years in prison an appropriate punishment for two people who really were doing a whole lot of good in the world before they made this incredibly stupid and devastating mistake?
So let me ask you then, do you apply that same standard to police officers who engage in one act, which was a horrible act, who the rest of their lives have lived above board and have lived exemplary lives, and then they do one thing that people then put them on trial for? Do you apply that same standard to police officers?
Doesn't it depend really on the one thing? I mean, if you're asking me, do I think that Derek Chauvin deserved a significant sentence?
Forget about Derek Chauvin.
Okay, so what are we talking about?
I'm talking about a police officer who is accused of whatever the act is. My guess is there wouldn't be a single case, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that you probably would never stand up for a police officer and say, well, this officer had never been in trouble with the law before, so I'm willing to give that person the benefit of the doubt, the way you are these two lawyers who are throwing Molotov cocktails at police cars.
So in my former incarnation, I was a federal public defender, and I did represent people who did the kinds of things that you're talking about, and I represented them incredibly zealously, and absolutely I would make that argument. I guess I should back up and say, I'm not a big believer in draconian punishments, really, for anything except the very most serious offenses. And so if it was a similar level offense committed by a police officer and that person was my client, I would have absolutely no problem arguing in good faith that they should get a sentence that was commensurate with what they did and not, say, 45 years.
Yeah, I guess I'm just concerned, sort of taking it out of the purely courtroom for a moment.
Okay.
And I'm concerned that people like yourself are willing to give these two attorneys kind of the benefit of the doubt, right? Saying they've lived exemplary lives. And I don't feel like, and again, I'm lumping you in maybe unfairly here, but I don't feel like people like you are often willing to give police officers who've lived exemplary lives that same benefit.
I understand why you're saying that, because I think I am a progressive. And of course, I am on the side of, for example, police officers being prosecuted when the charges call for it. And as you probably know, that's a relatively rare occurrence. And I think that part of the tumult of those days in 2020, which seems so far ago, is the sense that there wasn't going to be accountability. But I also truly believe that we need equal justice across the board. And so I really would not have a problem with advocating for leniency when it was deserved, regardless of who it was. But I understand why you would be
and I appreciate that. And I think it's important for you to say. I mean, I really do. I think that that's an important message for people to hear. Professor Bazelon, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.